July 15th, 1942, 11:30 hours. Grunar Island, northwest Scotland. Dr. Paul Files stood on the rocky beach of the mainland, binoculars pressed to his eyes, watching smoke rise from a small island half a mile across the water. On Grunar's windswept plateau, 80 sheep grazed in wooden pens arranged in concentric circles. In the center, a steel bomb casing sat bolted to a concrete platform packed with 106 pounds of a substance that would make the island uninhabitable for the next 48 years. At precisely 11:35, the bomb detonated. The explosion itself was unremarkable, a dull thump that barely carried across the water, a brown cloud that dissipated quickly in the Atlantic wind. Files lowered his binoculars. The sheep continued grazing. To the untrained eye, nothing had happened, but Files knew better. Floating invisible in that dissipating cloud were billions of microscopic spores, each one capable of lying dormant in soil for a century, each one deadly enough to kill a human in days. Britain had just tested the world's first weaponized anthrax bomb, and in doing so, created something so terrifying that even in the depths of total war, even facing Nazi Germany at its most desperate, the British government would decide it could never be used. This is the story of a weapon Britain deployed exactly once, in an uninhabited testing ground, then spent decades trying to forget. By 1942, Britain stood alone against a totalitarian empire that stretched from the Atlantic to the Urals. London had endured the Blitz. U-boats strangled supply lines. Intelligence suggested Germany was developing biological weapons. Winston Churchill, never one for half measures, authorized a program that would make chemical warfare look humane by comparison. The task fell to Porton Down, Britain's chemical warfare research facility in Wiltshire, established after the horrors of mustard gas in World War I. But this was different. Scientists weren't weaponizing chemicals, they were weaponizing life itself. Anthrax was chosen for specific reasons. The bacterium exists in two states: active, when it rapidly multiplies and produces lethal toxins, and dormant, when it forms near indestructible spores that can survive heat, cold, radiation, and time itself. Spores had been recovered from Egyptian tombs, still viable after 3,000 years. Once inhaled, anthrax spores germinate in the lungs. Symptoms begin innocuously: fever, fatigue, a mild cough. Then the bacteria multiply exponentially. Time equals 300 milliseconds / producing 3 toxins that systematically shut down the immune system, cause massive internal hemorrhaging, and induce septic shock. Death rate for inhalational anthrax, even with modern antibiotics, hovers around 50%. In 1942, it was nearly 100%. Dr. Fields, Britain's leading bacteriologist, refined the process of weaponization. Dry the bacteria into powder. Mill it to particles between 1 and 5 microns, small enough to reach deep into the lungs, large enough to settle on surfaces. Pack it into bombs designed to burst at low altitude, creating aerosol clouds that would drift over cities on the wind. Mathematics were terrifying. A single pound of weaponized anthrax, properly dispersed over a city, could kill hundreds of thousands. The spores would contaminate buildings, streets, water supplies. Cleanup would require burning everything, every structure, every tree, every inch of topsoil. The affected area would remain a dead zone for generations. Churchill received the projections. 5 aircraft, each carrying a dozen anthrax bombs, could render Berlin uninhabitable. But first, the weapon needed testing. Grunard Island was selected for its isolation. Just 520 acres of rocky moorland off Scotland's northwest coast, uninhabited except for birds and, for the purposes of the experiment, 80 sheep brought from the mainland. The animals were penned at varying distances from the detonation point, some as close as 50 yards, others 200 yards away. The July 15th test exceeded expectations. Within 3 days, sheep in the nearest pens began showing symptoms: fever, labored breathing, bloody discharge. By day 5, they were dead. Autopsies revealed lungs turned to black, hemorrhaged tissue, organs dissolved by bacterial toxins. The spores had worked exactly as designed. But something else happened that Fields hadn't anticipated. Sheep in the outer pens, those that should have received sublethal doses, also began dying. Not in 3 days, in 6, in 8, in 10. The anthrax spores weren't just settling. They were being tracked on hooves, carried on wool, contaminating everything the sheep touched. And they weren't dying. Every rain shower, every wind gust, every disturbance of soil released more spores into the air. By August, every sheep on Grunard Island was dead. Scientists who landed on the island to collect samples wore sealed suits and respirators. They took soil cores from the detonation site. The spore concentration was so high that a single gram of dirt contained enough anthrax to kill thousands. The British government purchased Grunard Island from its owner for £500. They erected signs on the mainland beach. Grunard Island. This island is government property under experiment. The ground is contaminated with anthrax and dangerous. Landing is prohibited. The signs would remain for 46 years. In underground laboratories at Porton Down, production scaled up. By 1943, Britain had manufactured 5 million anthrax cattle cakes, small feed pellets laced with anthrax spores, designed to be dropped over German farmland to devastate livestock and food supplies. Operation Vegetarian, it was called. The cakes sat in storage, awaiting orders that never came. Churchill had authorized the weapon's development, but he also understood what using it would mean. Germany had its own biological weapons program. If Britain deployed anthrax, Germany would retaliate. The escalation spiral was predictable and apocalyptic. Cities transformed into permanent dead zones, millions dead from disease rather than bombs. A legacy of contamination that would outlast any peace treaty. There was also the matter of control. Chemical weapons, horrific as they were, dissipated. You could reclaim a mustard gas battlefield in months. Anthrax contamination was functionally permanent. The island experiment proved that. Release anthrax spores over Berlin, and Berlin would remain contaminated for a century or more. Use it defensively in Britain, and you'd be poisoning your own land. Intelligence reports provided another deterrent. By 1944, Allied codebreakers had established that while Germany had explored biological weapons, they'd reached the same conclusion Britain had. The risk of uncontrolled escalation outweighed any tactical advantage. Neither side wanted to be first. The 5 million cattle cakes were incinerated in 1945, shortly after Germany's surrender. The bombing program was quietly shelved, but Grunard Island remained contaminated. Time equals 4 milliseconds greater than a permanent reminder of the weapon Britain had built, but dared not use. Decades passed. The warning signs weathered and faded, but remained. Local legends grew around the island, stories of cursed ground, of birds that wouldn't land there, of seals that avoided its beaches. Scientists periodically took samples. The anthrax concentration barely declined. Spores remained viable in the topsoil, protected from ultraviolet light, capable of germinating whenever disturbed. In 1981, activists from Dark Harvest Commando, a group demanding government cleanup of the island, landed on Grunard, collected contaminated soil, and deposited it at Porton Down's gates with a note demanding decontamination. The government finally agreed to attempt it. The operation took 5 years. Scientists developed a method using formaldehyde solution mixed with seawater, sprayed under pressure to penetrate the soil. In 1986, 280 tons of formaldehyde were pumped across Grunard Island's surface. They removed and burned the top layer of soil from the most contaminated areas. Repeated testing followed. In April 1990, Junior Defense Minister Michael Neubert travelled to Grunard Island, stood on its rocky beach, and officially declared it safe. Sheep were reintroduced as a final test. They survived. The island was returned to its heirs. But safe is relative. Cleanup removed 99% of the spores. That remaining 1% represents billions of anthrax particles still lurking in Grunard's soil. The island will never be truly clean. It will forever be the place where Britain proved that some weapons are too dangerous even for war. After the war, Britain's biological weapons program was quietly dismantled. Unlike nuclear research, which continued and evolved into civilian energy programs, biological weapons research offered no peaceful applications. The knowledge was too dangerous, the potential for catastrophe too high. Most documentation was classified at the highest levels, some was destroyed entirely. The government took the unusual step of not just sealing records, but actively working to ensure the research couldn't be replicated. Scientists who'd worked on the anthrax program were prohibited from publishing their findings. Blueprints for bomb casings were destroyed, production facilities were decommissioned and converted to other purposes. The goal was comprehensive erasure, not just hiding the weapon, but ensuring it would be difficult for anyone, enemy nation or terrorist group, to recreate it. Some knowledge, Britain had decided, was too dangerous to preserve. Grunard Island stands as the only physical evidence of this buried chapter. A beautiful, empty island off the Scottish coast, its heather-covered hills and rocky beaches now indistinguishable from dozens of others scattered along that rugged coastline. But dig deep enough into its soil, disturb the wrong patch of earth, and you might still find them. Microscopic spores, remnants of the weapon Britain built in desperation, tested once and chose never to use. The sheep graze peacefully now, watched over by seabirds and swept by Atlantic winds. The warning signs are gone, but Grunard Island's true legacy remains, a testament to the moment humanity created a weapon so terrible that even in the depths of total war, even facing annihilation, the cost of using it proved too high. Some victories, time equals 3 milliseconds / Britain discovered, aren't worth winning. Some weapons aren't worth deploying. Some knowledge is better buried and forgotten, left to decompose slowly in contaminated soil, a secret kept not from enemies, but from our own worst impulses.